It's Friday, it's the 20th of June. You're watching ARIRANG Korea's only global network. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Gon-young. We're just getting reports that Tokyo is announcing the results of the review of its apology over the use of women across Asia as wartime sex slaves before and during World War II before a parliamentary committee as we speak. Seoul has been keeping a watchful eye on how the Abe administration will interpret the so-called Kono statement issued back in 1993. And we will connect live with our foreign affairs correspondent for more details later in this newscast. Meanwhile, Japan stands in great contrast to Germany when it comes to handling its wartime atrocities. Almost 70 years after the end of the World War II, German authorities this week tracked down a former Nazi who has been living in the United States for decades. Our Kwon So-ah tells us the 89-year-old will likely be extradited to Germany to answer to the long-standing charges against him.
Nearly 70 years have passed since the Second World War ended. 89-year-old Johann Breyer was 17 when he joined the Nazi military as a guard and for the past 6 decades has been living in the United States. But this week, Breyer was arrested in Philadelphia upon Germany's request on charges of having aided in the killing of 216,000 German, Hungarian, and Czechoslovakian Jews in Auschwitz.
His guarding in the Death's Head battalion that he belonged to made it possible for those killings.
There's a good chance that Breyer will now be turned over to Germany as the U.S. has an extradition treaty with the country. 10 years ago, a U.S. court ruled that Breyer was not responsible for his acts during World War II because he was so young when he joined the Nazis. Breyer, who has been living in the States since the 1950s, has claimed he was forced to carry out the heinous acts. Despite that, Germany never stopped looking for evidence and recently found out that Breyer had received several awards for his active participation in the genocide of Jews. Germany's persistence in punishing those responsible for past wrongdoings continues to gain attention here in Korea, as it stands in stark contrast to Japan's attitude towards its past atrocities. Japanese authorities have done little to nothing to compensate or apologize to the women that were forced into sexual slavery by Japanese troops in the early 20th century. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Now, the U.S. is stepping into Iraq once again, but this time a little bit differently. President Obama is sending a substantial group of military advisors to Iraq, but they won't be on the front lines. He's actually ordered some 300 military advisors to back up Iraqi security personnel in their fight against ISIL militants. Here's Connie Lee with this report.
Washington is extending a much-needed helping hand to Iraq. The U.S. has decided to send about 300 military advisors to help Iraqi troops fight off insurgents. This nearly 3 years after President Barack Obama pulled the last U.S. troops out of the country. President Obama made it clear, though, that the help this time around will not be in combat.
American forces will not be returning to combat in Iraq, but we will help Iraqis as they take the fight to terrorists who threaten the Iraqi people, the region.
In a briefing at the White House on Thursday, Obama also stressed the need for Iraq's government to be more inclusive.
It is clear, though, that only leaders that can govern with an inclusive agenda are going to be able to truly bring the Iraqi people together and help them through this crisis. Meanwhile, the United States will not pursue military options that support one sect inside of Iraq at the expense of another.
He added that the U.S. is not in position to choose Iraq's leaders. But citing support from the U.S., some political leaders in Iraq are calling for the prime minister to be replaced. Nouri al-Maliki has come under fire for his sectarian policies, favoring Shiite interests, and is widely blamed for the spiraling Sunni insurgency. The insurgents, called the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or the ISIL, are now in control of many of Iraq's northern cities. And the ISIL, now eyeing Baghdad, poses the greatest threat to Iraq's security since the U.S.-led invasion back in 2003. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
Hyundai Motor has emerged as the best non-luxury auto brand in the United States. Not only that, just 3 other brands performed better than the Korean carmaker in an overall quality survey for 2014 models by a U.S. researcher. Kim Ji-yeon has the details.
Hyundai Motor Group has been rated as the #1 automaker among non-luxury brands for making quality cars. In a 2014 survey by U.S. researcher J.D. Power, Hyundai, which includes the Kia brand, beat the likes of General Motors and Toyota in new car quality. Hyundai rose 4 ranks from last year, while last year's best performer GM fell to 3rd place and Toyota moved up 1 notch to the 2nd place this year. Including luxury brands, Hyundai ranked 4th place in quality ranking after Porsche, Jaguar, and Lexus. It moved up 6 notches from last year. 5 models from Hyundai and Kia brands were voted as the best performers in 5 vehicle categories in the 2014 survey by J.D. Power, which is widely followed for car quality. They included Hyundai's Genesis, which topped in the midsize premium car segment. Hyundai's Accent and Elantra won the honor in the small car and compact car segment, respectively. Kia Sportage and Cardenza ranked the highest in the small SUV and large car segment, respectively. This year's study was based on feedback from more than 86,000 drivers of new 2014 model year vehicles after 90 days of ownership. The study was conducted from November last year to May this year. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
Now, it's long been believed that Koreans work some of the longest hours in the world, and while that is true, a new report suggests it may not be the entire story. In a report comparing Korea's labor conditions and productivity to its neighbors in the region, the Center for Free Enterprise found that Koreans did in fact work the most hours in 2010 among OECD members at nearly 2,200 hours. But workers in Hong Kong and Singapore actually logged more time at the office. In terms of productivity, well, the report found that Korea lagged far behind major advanced nations such as the U.S., France, and Germany, and accounted for just 2/3 of the OECD average. Well, clearly, men and women have quite different views on the need to tie the knot. 4 out of every 10 women in Seoul consider marriage an option and not a requirement. Well, that's a clear shift away from tradition, and this is according to a poll by the Seoul Metropolitan Government. And the survey was based on Seoulites aged 13 and over in 2012. Now, the figure compares with the 28% recorded by their male counterparts. Now, such changes in marriage notions has also raised the average age for their first marriage. The average age at which women got married stood at 30.4 years in 2013, which is up almost 5 years from 20 years ago. Now, nearly 50% of Seoul women aged between 25 and 39 were single as of 2010, up from about 20% in 1995. Well, the number of millionaires worldwide grew at the fastest pace last year since year 2000 on higher economic growth and rising stock markets. According to the latest World Wealth Report by RBC Wealth Management, the number of people with at least $1 million in investable assets rose 15% from a year ago to 13.7 million. Now, the amount of money they hold also grew by 14%, marking a record high of $52.5 trillion US. North America is still home to more millionaires than any other region, but Asia Pacific is catching up fast and is forecast to overtake North America this year. Now, a local court in Seoul has ruled that a progressive teachers union is not a legitimate labor group because it allows membership to fire teachers as well. Well, back in October, the Korean Teachers and Education Workers Union, or KTU, filed a lawsuit with the Seoul Administrative Court against a government decision that outlawed the KTU due to its refusal to deny ousted teachers entry. Well, it surely has implications on labor relations here in this country. Let's bring in Dr. Kim Byung-ju for a discussion. So, Dr. Kim, yesterday's ruling, in fact, against this KTU, first of all, what does yesterday's ruling mean, one, for the 60,000 strong KTU?
Right. It means several things for this Korean Teachers and Educational Workers Union. As a result of yesterday's ruling, they lose their name, their roles, responsibilities, as well as their funding, also their people, meaning that they can no longer use the name union, trade union, and they cannot be sitting at the negotiation table to negotiate labor issues that relates to the teachers and educational workers. And also, they will have to lose about 78 of the full 78, I think is the number, the full-time the executives or leaders of the union who are on leave from the school. They'll now have to go back to their school and will have to work on their original mission of teaching students. So they lose those people. And also they've been receiving, KTU, Korea Teachers Union, has been receiving about 5.2 billion won every year in terms of public money, and they can no longer receive that. That's a big blow to them. And also, they will no longer be able to collect the membership dues. So losing the name, roles, responsibilities, as well as funding, and also people, this is a critical blow. And that's why they're saying, without any change to this ruling, probably this means the end of KTU.
Now, KTU, of course, Korean Teachers and Education Workers Union, it has a long, turbulent history, right?
Right, indeed. It was launched back in 1989, but at that time, a lot of parents here in Korea had a strong feeling against the idea of teachers of their children being an organized workers. It was not easily accepted, so the conservatives in the Korean political circle took advantage of that and not allowed this union to be legalized or legally accepted union. And it went on for about 10 years during the Notae administration and then Kim Il-sung administration, which were all conservative governments. They would not allow that. It was 10 years after that, 1999, when this union was accepted, as a legal union, trade union that was under Kim Dae-jung administration, first progressive government that Korea ever had. And since then, what's been happening was during the two progressive administrations, Kim Dae-jung and Roh Moo-hyun, their relationship with the government was not very peaceful at all. Indeed, there were a lot of tough confrontations. And when Lee Myung-bak administration, the conservative government, came back to the central stage, this kind of process of what we're seeing today was pretty much expected.
Here in this country, the KTU, even if for those of us who are not too familiar with the organization, it comes off as quite a political organization with color, rather than just a teachers union. Now, in that long history, the case of this particular ruling has a significant impact. Right,
indeed, it did, and then it began all back in like 2010. At the beginning of Lee Myung-bak administration, which, as I said, had been expected. What happened was the Labor Ministry actually issued an order to KTU to change their internal regulation that had been based on which the 9 members who were former teachers had remained within the organization. They said doing so goes against the law that governs the overall status of the teachers, as well as how they are represented in the labor union activities. So the Labor Ministry said that's against the law, and against that decision, actually, KTU took that decision to the court. And it took about 2 years for them to fight all the way to the Supreme Court, where they eventually lost. So it was a long legal process they have already gone through during that time between year 2010 and year 2012. And since then, based on this Supreme Court ruling, the Labor ministry issued the second order. And then the KTU actually took this case to the vote for all the members, altogether KTU members. And then what they did was...
Which is 6,000.
Right, exactly,
Right.
60,000.
60,000.
60,000. And then what happened was last year in October, they voted to sustain their position, which the government is illegal. That's why the labor union, the labor ministry issued the second order. And based on that order, the KTU said, oh, this order is not something we can accept. So they took it to the court once again, and then they got this ruling yesterday.
So what does this case of KTU ruling mean for labor relations in this country?
The thing is, Korea's labor, the camp had been represented by two progressive groups. One is KTU and the other is KCTU. FKTU had been more moderate side of it. So this KTU has been two of the two pillars of the progressive side of the labor movement here in Korea. Now, KTU losing its status is a big blow to the progressive side of the labor group here. So there are a lot of concerns in the minds of those people who support the progressive causes here. But the thing is, so far what's been happening is the progressive side of the Korea's labor movement had been relied upon so-called rule of law. They felt that the court has been taking their side quite continuously. The last example being the court ruling on the base wage issue, which took the side of the workers.
Right, right.
But now they're saying, well, we cannot accept the court's decision here. So this means it's a crossroad for the progressive segment of the Korea's labor movement, whether they are going to continue on the old way of going with the rule of law or going against that. So this is a big dilemma, and a strategic decision is ahead of them at this point.
Right. We will see a battle there.
Right.
Definitely.
Exactly.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Kim Byung-ju.
Thank you.
All right, so Japan's foreign ministry, or the Japanese parliamentary committee, actually heard to the results of an investigation that a team of investigators had reviewed the Kono statement, which was issued back in 1993 as a way to settle the comfort women issue, or those women and girls who were forced into sexual enslavement by the Japanese military before and during World War II. Let's go live to our Foreign Affairs correspondent Hwang Sung-hee for more details. Sung-hee, what can you tell us at this point?
Well, Kanyang, the results of a government-conducted review on the Kono statement is being announced at a House of Representatives Budget Committee meeting as we speak. The statement, like you said, was issued back in 1993 by then Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono and acknowledged for the very first time the forced sexual enslavement of women by the Japanese military. Now, more than 200,000 women, mostly Korean, were forced to serve the Japanese military in comfort stations during the Second World War. But since February, the Japanese government has been re-examining this statement. According to latest Japanese reports, the review apparently says that the Korean government also played a role in the wording of the Kono statement. Japan's GG News Agency reports that Seoul and Tokyo held discussions on what the statement will look like under the condition that their dealings be kept a secret. Now, this will definitely trigger heavy criticism from South Korea. The team of Japanese inspectors will hold a press conference later this afternoon, in less than 10 minutes actually, at 4:30 p.m. Korea time here. We are also expecting to hear from the South Korean government on its reaction to the results of the review. Back to you, Kanyang.
All right, thank you, Sung-hee, and we will be getting more details from you in our later newscast. That was our Foreign Affairs correspondent, Hwang Sung-hee. Well, day 8 of the 2014 FIFA World Cup saw 2 more groups move into their second round of matches, with Colombia dispatching Cote d'Ivoire 2-1 early on. Japan and Greece fought out a rather dull no-point draw, while Uruguay defeated England to leave the European side on the brink of elimination. For all of the day's biggest winners and losers, and for what to look ahead this weekend, let's go to our sports correspondent Song Ji-sun. Ji-sun, happy Friday to you.
Happy Friday, everyone! The good thing about the weekend is that we can now watch the World Cup games morning or night without worrying too much about how we'll make it to work the very next day. In Thursday's action, Uruguay's Luis Suarez was the star of the night, scoring 2 excellent goals in the South American side's 2-1 victory over England. The English side, suffering their second straight defeat, stand on the brink of elimination now, needing Italy to do them a favor to have any chance at all. Suarez is well known to Korean fans here too, as it was his 2 goals in the second round of the 2010 World Cup, which sent Korea packing. Also note that he finished the South American qualification phase for Brazil as a top scorer with 11 goals. England's Wayne Rooney scored his first goal in Brazil in his 3rd World Cup, but an overall lackluster performance from England ensures they stay rooted on 0 points after 2 games. Now, elsewhere in Brazil, Japan and Greece each had chances to win the game, but it finished 0-0 with Greece a man short for most of the match after being sent off. On the other side, Colombia may now focus on their strategy for their round of 16 as they remain atop the group, beating Côte d'Ivoire 2-1. With that said, let's take a look at where the teams stand in their groups a week after the World Cup kicked off. Now back in Iguazu Falls, Team Korea are busy preparing for their second group match. They had a day to recover with kimchi and beef after the Russian match, but they're back in the field now prepping for Algeria, the game they will be looking to win to give them a great shot at getting to the second stage. And they're certainly not short of confidence going into Sunday's match.
The draw against Russia got us a point, and I witnessed how my team gave it their all during those 90 minutes. I'm sure my players will be in even better condition against Algeria.
We've been studying how the Algerian side plays, their positions and characteristics. We are going to monitor their games in even more depth in the coming days.
Team Korea's second match against Algeria kicks off at 4 p.m. Sunday local time. And here's a look at the game scheduled for this Friday and the weekend. That wraps up our World Cup update for this Friday, and do not miss our live coverage of the nationwide cheering for Korea's next game on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend filled with football fever.
Well, we definitely will. Thank you, Jisun, for that. Now, remember Paul the octopus? Well, the cephalopod earned fame by picking the winners of games in the 2010 World Cup. Well, Paul has since passed of old age, but Korea just may have found a replacement. And this one is no octopus. In fact, he's a retired top-class footballer who played in a number of World Cup games himself, now providing commentary on matches for a local broadcaster. Our Shin Se-min has more on the former left back who has already earned the moniker Young Pyo the Octopus.
Paul the Octopus and the prognosticating Turtles of Brazil have nothing on Korean broadcaster Lee Young-pyo. The commentator for Korea Broadcasting System has been accurately predicting the winners and even the scores of this year's World Cup in Brazil. Early on in Korea's match against Russia match this week, Lee, a retired Korean national soccer player, said forward Lee Gun-ho was capable of piercing the Russian defense and added that if Team Korea could hold on until the 70th minutes of the match, a chance would present itself. 68 minutes in and just 12 minutes after stepping onto the pitch for the first time, Lee Gun-ho fired a long-range shot that found its way to the back of the net. But commentator Lee's predictions don't end there. Last month during the World Cup preliminary group stage, he said that the Spanish national team was entering a dark period. That turned out to be an accurate call, as well as the defending champs have already been knocked out from advancing. Lee's prediction for the games and scores between Italy and England and Ivory Coast against Japan also turned out to be right. Lee, an ex-Tottenham Hotspur defender, insisted that his forecasts were hardly lucky guesses, but that hasn't stopped people from referring to him as the next Paul the Octopus. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
Good afternoon. You'll notice a blurry-eyed Seoul lights these days as many people are waking up extra early to take in the World Cup games half a world away. And Korean fans are looking ahead to our team's next match, which begins at 4 a.m. Korean time on Monday. Now, the weather is shaping up to be nice for the game day with temperatures in the mid-teens and fairly low humidity levels. Now, as for the weather conditions here in Korea, rain is in the forecast all over the nation tonight, up to 20 millimeters over in the central region, while between 5 to 30 over in Jeju Island. Then it's another cloudy day today, but will be hotter than yesterday with temperatures up in the low 30s. Now going over to our temperature readings, Seoul will top out at 29 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 30 and 26 degrees. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island tops out at 25, Dokdo at 20, while Mangungang tops out at 18. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park again. Back to you, Kanyang.
Thanks, Michelle, for that, and thank you for watching, and join us again at 6 p.m. Korea time.